Hello and welcome. Today we'll be reviewing some vintage Leatherman multi-tools. These span from a variety of time periods from the late 1980s through the mid-90s to the early 2000s. I have these tools on loan from my brother, who was gracious enough to allow me to access his collection of tools here. And we have quite a variety of tools to get through and look at, and all with unique features on them that you may or may not find on the newer type of Leatherman models. Here on the table we have a variety of different tools, and we do have a newer tool to compare to the older tool set, and we'll get into that later in a moment. But starting with the lineup here, we have the Leatherman Pulse with the included older bit kit set that integrates with this tool here, and the included pouch and the included original bit sets that came with this tool. This is a Leatherman expansion item, which they don't sell anymore. We have the Leatherman Super Tool here. We have the Leatherman Sideclip here, an original pre-1992 PST here, and we also have a mini tool. We also have the Leatherman Flair here. And for, like I said, comparison in the beginning, we have a modern Leatherman Bond platform multi-tool here. So we'll put this off on the side and we'll dig into these tools right away. Let's start with the Leatherman Flair. Now this is a nice multi-tool in that it has a lot of features that would be more comfortable in the European market, meaning there's no locking tools on here. It does have some slip joints with rigidity for the tools, but as we can see, the namesake of the tool is on this piece here. I don't know if it's a brass piece or not, but it does say Flair here with a little bit of artistic design of grapes and whatnot. So this would come out on the outside tool, and you can see the ruler here and the centimeter markings, and also in the inches on both sides. So we have that. And on this piece here, this functions as a assist piece for the corkscrew on a wine bottle of such. I'm not sure how exactly it works, as I don't drink and I never use this for a wine bottle. So I can't say how this would work precisely, but that's the intention. So we have the corkscrew and the assist here, and also on the assist, I'm sure you can see these cutouts here. What those are, they are the bottle cap lifter and also a can opener as well. So you have two different tools on this one tool here, actually three if you count the assist. So that is the tool set on the outside of the Leatherman Flair. Quite a nice feature to it, and a unique looking Leatherman multi-tool, at least in the lineup here. So if we open it up, or rather before we open it up, we do have a keyring holder here for a lanyard attachment point. So they typically do that on a lot of the older models here. So let's open this one up and take a look inside. First, we'll notice the plier head here says USA on here in Leatherman. They discontinued that after a certain point. And in this particular model, they do have a soft wire cutter in the center and the hardwire cutter at the very bottom there. So this is sort of like the second generation plier head compared to some of the original models, which we'll get into later in the video. We have our standard plier head here and a fine tooth needle nose plier. We'll see the same feature set throughout most of our older vintage Leathermans. So let's get to this side here. We do have a pair of scissors, much like the generation first wave from Leatherman. So these are our scissors here. Quite a useful tool for a Leatherman multi-tool, in my opinion. I do use scissors quite a lot, and we'll get to one of the more unique features of the tool here. This is a fork inside the tool, and I think it's one of the coolest things about this tool is that you can actually eat hors d'oeuvres and even meals to some degree with this. It's very small, obviously, so it's made to be a backup tool, but nonetheless it has been used in a variety of different situations. I'll give you an example. My brother is a videographer for weddings sometimes, and they forget to give him utensils, and so he'll pull this out on the wedding. And it's a great conversation piece when you start eating with something like this. People will start asking questions, obviously. So I guess the point I'm trying to get to is that this is a good mess kit item in case you don't have a utensil to use with, at least a fork. So that's kind of cool that they included that with this. It's mainly for hors d'oeuvres, but you can eat some meals with it, but you don't get too crazy with that. And so we also have a little bit of a metal piece here on the side to help keep this in place, the outside assist, and it's kind of hard to get to it, so I have to pull out a bunch of tools to get to it here. Probably the scissors, and we'll finally get to our slotted screwdriver here on the side finally. It's kind of hard to get to that with the nail nick, so that's one of the issues I've had with the older Leathermans, is that it's kind of hard to get to some of the tools because they tend to clump up and you have to open other tools to get to them. So we have a slotted screwdriver on that side of the scale. So that's the tools for that side of the scale here. On this side, we have our standard implementation of tools. So another unique tool, which we'll get to in a moment. First, we have our combo blade. This is a straight edge over here at the top and serrated. So perfectly good for probably cutting food, meat, probably things like that. So that's why they added a combo tool, and that kind of makes sense to me with this tool. Normally, I would not like a combo type of tool, but there it is. There's your combo knife blade there. And once again, these are not locking. They do have a slip joint here, which is a resistive capture. By that I mean it's got resistance to folding in, but it will fold in under pressure. So, but hopefully you're not getting that violently aggressive with your food. Next up is a spreader, or what I like to call a spreader. This is a highly polished piece. It's not sharp. It's for something like butter, perhaps, or cream, or whatever. So that would be another thing. Or in some cases, you can use it as a flat, not a spoon, but a flat holder. Things like that. You can get creative with that tool, but that's a unique tool to the Leatherman Flair, which I kind of like personally, but it may seem like a waste of space to others. Moving along, we do have a small tweaker, or a slotted screwdriver here, and then we have the 3D Phillips head screwdriver here with the rounded shank, and then we have our slotted screwdriver here. And that's it for the scale tools on the Leatherman Flair. And quite a unique tool. I would like to see this come back into the market, because having a utensil to eat with on hand in a multi-tool can be practical in some situations, like we discussed. And we'll get more into that later on with commenting on bringing back some of the older vintage features in a more modern platform. So that's the Leatherman Flair. And let's go ahead and put that on the side here. Next up, we have let's go to the PST here, actually, before we move along to the other tools here. This is the original PST Pre-1992 model, and we can tell that based on the stamping on the front, the US registration TM trademark here. We can also tell at the front top here, this is very angular, not as well rounded as, say, some of the newer type of models. Let's get the Sideclip for direct comparison here. It's a little bit more rounder, not as angular, and there is no date stamp on the inside, and plus the main blade is a little bit different. So we'll go over that comparison in a moment. But like all the other Leatherman tools that we have on the table, we have measurement markings on the outside scales in centimeters and inches. And let's go ahead and open up the plier head, and we can see in the plier head it says USA Leatherman on it. And this one does not have a soft wire cutter. Or rather, a hard wire cutter. It has the soft wire cutters only. And standard fare for the pliers, basic pliers in the front, neo nose here with the fine tooth gradient. So we have all that. It's a little bit thinner. And we also have the keyring holder for lanyard attachment point potentially in the front here. And let's get into the tool set here. These are non-locking, and these do tend to fold down as the resistive capture isn't that resistive. So in my PST that I have, it's a later 90s model PST. These tended to fold down when I was working with them, and they would hurt me or mess up what I was doing. So you have to use these with a little bit of finesse. So this is our file. It's got a fine gradient on the single edge file here. We got a bottom portion as well, a third side, and then we have the crosshatch section here as well. And let's go ahead and open up our other tools here on the side. Once again, they're not locking. So we have a smaller type of slotted screwdriver, and we have the older type of shank for the 3D Phillips head screwdriver here. As you can see, it's square cut and not the rounded one like we saw on the Flair. And then we have our combo bottle cap can opener tool here. They did not implement the wire stripper function here until we get to, say, the super tool. And that's it for that side of the PST. Moving along on this side, we have our main blade, and you can also tell the blade difference here. This is going to be a different blade than later models. So this is one from the earlier versions that we have on here. I forget what type of blade this would be called, but some of you who know blades better than I do can probably mention that for me. But this is a different style of blade in the older PST. So opening up the other tools here, we're going to fan them out. We have more slotted screwdrivers because you can never have enough, right? And a medium-sized one and a larger-sized one, and then we have the all here with no sewing eyelet. So that is the tool set of the older pre-1992 Leatherman, and plus in these scales here, there's no stamping of a date code. So that's also how you can tell that this is an older type of multi-tool. So put that on the side here. We'll compare that to a couple other tools. Now moving along to another interesting tool, it's a very minimalistic one, is the Leatherman mini tool. This came out in the late 80s, I believe, and I think it was their second design, if I'm not mistaken. And we can see on the hole here on the scale, that is an attachment point for a keyring. And we have our pliers here. So let's compare these pliers to the PST real quick, since they're the most direct comparison in terms of time period. We can tell it still says USA made on here. It's slightly smaller, but it still has the same feature of having the basic plier head, the needle nose section with the fine tooth, and our soft wire cutters here in the center. So put that back to the side here. And we also have the inches and centimeter markings on the outside scales. So we still continue that trend on here. All these tools are going to have that on the outside, which is quite interesting for the older vintage set and even the newer one as well. So on the inside, we have access to a combo tool. This is our slotted screwdriver with a crosshatch section of a file and a third portion on the bottom, and also the first portion, which is a single hatch section also. Although it's quite small and tiny, but that's to save space and be part of its mini tool namesake. On the other side, we have a nice small straight blade. And I'm not going to pull this all the way out because it's kind of hard to push back in, but it does have nice resistive capture on a slip lock joint. To access the full potential of this tool, you would deploy these extra extension parts inside the actual scale, which is ingenious in my opinion, that it folds out to a full size handled plier, although it's not very comfortable to use and bear down on, but it still can get the job done. And that's how you would access the full potential of the pliers here. Now, if you wanted to, you can put back one of these, right? And I'll go over the tool sets on each of these, which is quite fascinating. Much like the Flair and its assist, we do have cutouts here. As you can see, part of that design transitions over to the Flair, which is quite interesting. And you have bottle cap lifters and can opener. So this is our bottle cap lifter. And then on the other side, if we pull it out, we have our can opener, I believe. So let's just pull this out real quick to show you what it looks like. And there we go. So on this side, we have that portion there. So you can access that as well. So very ingenious design, in my opinion. Very cool design. I think it would be a nice design to have back in a main platform kind of way. And so that is the Leatherman mini tool. This is a late 80s version. So we'll put that on the side there. And let's move over to a later 90s, early 2000s tool. And this is the Leatherman Pulse. Now, what's interesting about the Pulse and what it did differently, and we're skipping some technological advancements here for a moment, but the Pulse, if we compare it to, say, the PST, is a much thicker platform, but they did implement something in there, and that is the locking tools on the inside via these, I believe they're called cams, if I'm not mistaken, or spring release mechanisms. I'm not sure the actual technical term for these, but this allows the tool to lock, and that's why it's a little bit thicker than the original PST. So let's go ahead, and we notice the inches and centimeter markings on the outside ruler, and these newer features here, the cams, you can push them that way or grab them this way to unlock the tools inside. So let's open it up, and we still have a plier head that says USA on it, and we'll open up the PST. We'll be using the PST for comparisons quite a lot here. We can see the change in the plier head here, and this is a little bit thinner, not as beefy as the newer ones. And plus, after 1996, I believe they added the hardwire cutters inside here. You can barely see it, but it's there. We have the soft wire cutters and the hardwire cutters indicated by this little marking here, and everything else to the plier head is still the same. The tooth grading still the same on the needle nose section and also the regular section here. So they improved the plier head a little bit with the Pulse, with its bigger size. So we can look at the tool set now that the Pulse has. And we also notice that the knife is also different as well. So we'll demonstrate the locking capabilities of this real quick. So now it's locked into place. It's not really going to go anywhere unless you put down a really strong amount of pressure, which will probably break the tool. But you pull back on the cam, and now it's released the pressure, and then you can put your knife back in and close it up. So that was a nice innovative design they came up with, but we're kind of skipping ahead. There was another design before this, which we'll get to in the super tool later on. So that is the knife portion of that side of the scale. And we do have a precursor to the Leatherman Wave 2nd generation type of scissors, which we can see here, developed in the Pulse. And then finally we have some more slotted screwdrivers here on the side. We have a longer medium-sized one and a fatter, shorter slotted screwdriver here. So that's it for that side of the scale here on tools. And then going over to this side, we have our typical file. We have a crosshatch section that's coarse grained, and then we have a third section on the bottom here. And what we have here, which is really nice in my opinion, which I wish they would implement in, say, the Wave series and a couple other series of the more modern tools, is a diamond coated file with a groove in the center for sharpening hooks. I believe that that is a nice addition to this file, and I wish they would continue that with the newer files. I'm not sure why they stopped it or what was happening, but it would be nice to see that implementation in the future. So that is our file on this side here. We have a very small slot screwdriver here, and then we have the newer shank generation. If you look at the shank on here, it's curved, not the square ones, of our 3D Phillips head screwdriver. And then finally, we have our combo bottle cap can opener piece. We still haven't gotten to the part where they implemented a wire stripper in the base here. So this is an older model type. And once again, we have these cams here to release the tools once they lock out. So that's particularly a nice feature in the Pulse. So that is the Pulse here. I'm going to show and demonstrate the expansion tools here real quick with the Pulse. See if we can get this right. And if we notice on the top here, there's a rise in the, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but there's a rise here. And that rise is important because Leatherman developed its own tool that works with this. This is an expansion tool, and it has a part here, as you can see, slides right underneath that rise, and it captures right into the tool here. Now, I'm not sure what they call this expansion tool, but it allows you to use 1/4 inch bits with it, which is very practical. This has a inline position and has a 45, and it also has a right angle position via this spring here that you pull up and you can turn. So this is very secure in your tool, and you can drive different bits like that. And we'll pull out the bit set. This is the original bit set that came with this pouch for the Leatherman group here. So quite a fantastic piece of equipment, and I wish they would produce these and make these more with the newer set of tools. And I think this is a nice additional feature. So we can drive our different bits, as you can see, and this works with multiple types of the older vintage models, and also we'll get to it later, the Leatherman Bond platform, which is quite interesting. So for example, we're jumping ahead here, but I just want to point out on the Sideclip, it has a cutout portion here, and most would think that's kind of a useless thing about the Sideclip, but actually it's made to work with this tool. So that portion that sticks underneath the original part here actually sticks in this slot right there, and it captures it very well and allows you to do the same thing that I'm doing with the Pulse with the Sideclip. So that makes the Sideclip even more versatile, and a lot of these older tools very versatile as well. So you just want to point that out with this expansion tool. So it's quite a nice feat of engineering, in my opinion. So that is our Leatherman Pulse with the original kit, the original pouch here in relatively good condition. And we'll go ahead and put that back together nice and neatly. So that is our Pulse there in the kit. We'll put this off to the side here. Moving along, since we did talk about the Sideclip and the expansion port here, this is the Leatherman Sideclip, which is a sort of almost, I want to say, a precursor almost to the Leatherman Bond that was released about 2 years ago or so. So you can see there's a lot of similarities with this. We have the ruler and inches markings on the outside. This is obviously thicker, but it's a little more comfortable to hold in your hand. The clip is attached to here, and we have a removable clip on this one. And if you see in the top here, there's actually a portion to attach a key ring. and then from the keyring you can attach a lanyard on that. So that's nice to know. This one has the same idea on the top port here, so a lot of things transition over to the Bond from the clip. I think that was their intention at the R&D on Leatherman, although I can't say for certain. But we open this up and we notice immediately the plier head is different than the PST in that it says Leatherman tool, so they did change that marking over there, and it has our indicator here for the soft wire cutter and the hard wire cutter. So this is a later model head after 1996, I believe. So this is a later generation head here. We still have the same type of teeth in the center, fine gradient teeth on the needle nose section. And getting into it, we have a smaller blade in this one because it's a little bit smaller size, as we can see. And this still does not lock. It does have slip joints, but they're not very resistive capturing, meaning that they don't offer a lot of resistance like the newer models, like the Bond, for example, which I did review earlier. We also have our slotted screwdrivers here, a bigger one and a smaller one, and that's it for this side of the scale. On this side, we do have the combo can opener, bottle cap lifter, and a second generation shank Phillips head screwdriver here, a 3D one. And we also have our smaller slot screwdriver, if I can get to it. It's kind of hard with these older ones sometimes to get to the older tools, but here we go right there. And this one has more of a cut down portion on it as well, which is quite interesting for the Sideclip. And we also mentioned before that to use the expansion tool, this would simply close up and that tool would fit into the slot here, and we'd be able to use this as another tool to drive that tool there. So that's very, very nice to have that with the Leatherman Sideclip. So a very nice design, very sleek, very thin, very practical, easy to carry in your pocket, and very sought after too. So quite a fantastic tool. Let's put this on the side here, and we'll go over one of the last tools on the desk here. This is the Leatherman Super Tool. And what I like about this is that it still carries over the ruler measurements on the outside in inches and centimeters. And it's also in black oxidization, which is quite hard to find for something in this kind of a condition for this age and rarity. We also have our keyring holder here, which you can attach a lanyard to. And if we open this up, we can see our plier head. This is one of the older ones that say USA on it. And they do have the typical center pliers here and the typical needle nose pliers with the fine gradient teeth, which they did change in the newer models. We have our hard wire cutter, and it appears to be a soft wire cutter there in the center as well. And I do believe that this potentially has that wire crimper portion, I believe. Yes. And I'm not sure if this does not look like it has a wire cutter in the back, so it does not have that feature on this one, from what I can tell. So before I mentioned we skipped technological advancement from the Pulse in terms of locking tools. This actually has locking tools in it. So as you can see, this is all locked, right? And here's our blade, nice thick, long, straight blade here. And to unlock it, you would have to pull out another tool to disengage the lock. And this can be kind of tricky for obvious reasons. I could cut myself there, and you can disengage the tool once it was locked to being unlocked. So we have a file here on this side of the scale. This is a single hatch version, and it's fine gradient too, which I like. We have a third portion on the bottom, and then we have a coarse grained crosshatch section of the file. So that's it for that part in the Super Tool. And then we have a variety of different tools here. We have a thicker, medium-sized, I would say, slotted screwdriver, and a longer, smaller slotted screwdriver, along with the awl here. So we have these three different tools, as well as the main blade on this side of the scale. On this side, we should have a serrated blade here, and that's a nice length of a serrated blade. And no, it doesn't look like it has a sheepsfoot angle. It's more of a pointed angle here. And then finally, in this particular tool, they should have the, I'll unlock it here. We have a combo can opener, bottle cap lifter, and finally the V-notch wire stripper in the Super Tool original. So that's important to note. And we do have an older style shank of the 3D Phillips head in here, where it's squared and not rounded. So they have that in here, and it's nice and long and thin. And then finally, we do have our smaller tweaker or a slotted screwdriver here as well. And then we also have our saw. So that's quite nice to see that in the older original format. And that's it for the Super Tool 300, or rather the original. I keep wanting to say 300 like the newer model, but this is the original Super Tool, and it's quite a fantastic piece of equipment. And we can see the beginnings of the locking mechanisms, which then, I'll bring this out one more time for comparison, graduated to something like this. My throat's getting a little dry here. I apologize. So we have our locking mechanisms, which you can disengage like this. Instead of pulling out another one to disengage, we have this. This is also like the smaller brother to the Super Tool 200, which has the same mechanisms on it, which is a fantastic feat of engineering. And then following to the newer age where we have the press button. I don't have my, let me see if I can find it here. The wave type of locking, where this simply, you pull out a tool, say our bit exchanger. Instead of pulling that, you push this and it releases. So that is the graduation of technology advancements from the vintage era to the modern era on this Wave Plus through the Pulse. So that is quite a feature set with the Super Tool for that time. Now, let's put these all back up together and compare it to a more modern type of tool that's out there that's easily accessible, and why I feel it's a good platform to implement some of these older variations in with. So we have the Leatherman Bond, which I did go over recently, and a lot of the same tool sets on this platform of tool, as you notice, are very similar, especially when compared to the Sideclip, for example. This would be a direct competitor or a direct comparison for a more modern take. And I feel that for a mess kit or some sort of food kit, you can probably build off of the Leatherman Bond platform to implement some of the tool sets that we have in the Leatherman Flair. And I think that would be a good selling point for Leatherman to develop a tool like that based on the Bond platform. And the reason why I say the Bond platform is that we notice in the I guess you call it scales or whatever you want to call it on the side here, it has that portion which bumps up here, right? Much like the Pulse and the Super Tool. So that means you can reintroduce these older tools here, and they would work with the modern tools. So in other words, this captive point here on this tool, which fits in the Sideclip via the hole here, and I believe also in the mini tool it might actually work as well. It would fit into the Bond and precisely work as intended. You can change the angle, and you can still drive your bits with the older bit sets with the newer type of models. It works fairly well with that in there. I don't know if they designed that like that on purpose or if it was just a byproduct, but that's why I would suggest building off the Leatherman Bond platform, because it's still integrated with the older modular pieces of Leatherman tools. And it would bring back a sort of a, I don't want to say a need or demand for the older tools to come back, but it would be a backwards compatible tool with modern technology. And not for nothing, just as a point sake of the Bond here, they included this 3D Phillips head screwdriver, which is a lot stronger than most of these and the older ones, but you can also buy an extension piece that works with this and allows you to use their more modern bit kits and adapters. So that is important with the Bond platform. So the Bond, the Curl, that kind of platform would be a good starting point. And this kind of reminds me of the Rebar, this newer one with the rounded edges. One thing to note with the older ones, they were a little bit hard in the hands where they would hurt when you bear down on it. But they got the job done. They were weight efficient and small. So those are some of the older vintage Leathermans. Let me know which one you guys like, which one you use, which one you're trying to get, and why you would get it. And that's all I have to say for now. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your day.